Hello, and welcome to the greatest podcast in the world. Oh, this is not a tribute. If you don't get that reference, I'll be sad. Yes, it's Thinker Talk, where football chat amongst football fans is heavily encouraged, unless you're on your fifth beer and have a bit of a temper. I'm Josh Andrews, and as ever, I'm joined by the Vicky Sparks to my David Moyes, Matthew David. I should probably get a slap for that myself. Hi.
Hey?
Do you like that?
That was different.
Yeah, well, I felt like adding a little bit of humour straight in there, straight from the beginning. Anyway, yeah, let's just go straight into it. David Moyes.
Yeah. Sorry, caught me a bit off guard. Yeah, he's in a bit of bother. Quite rightly as well. In an interview with, I mean, you've given me the name. I totally had it in front of me anyway.
Yeah.
Basically, was not happy with a line of questioning that he was asked by a BBC reporter.
Sure.
And said that even though she's a woman, she should be careful not to get a slap in the face or something to that kind of content.
The quote was so just watch yourself. You still might get a slap even though you're a woman. Careful the next time you come in. That's the quote, according to The Guardian.
Yeah, and quite rightly, the FA want an explanation, and he went to the Sunderland board, I think, relatively quickly, and they're not happy about it either. They backed him for the time being, anyway. But no, what a stupid comment.
It's a stupid comment, but I'm gonna ask a question, and not to say that I am defending him, but I do want to ask, what exactly is, like, what specifically has he done wrong? That sounds like a really dumb question, but what is it about the thing he said that people are angry about? Because if it's sexism alone, I don't really get it.
I don't know if it's so much that the thing that I have a problem with is there's a reporter there doing their job, asking him questions like they're meant to be doing.
Right.
And what she asked was, because Ellis Short, who's the owner of Sunderland, was at their game, whether or not that added any pressure.
Right.
That was all she asked.
Mm-hmm.
And because he took offence to that as saying, his job's on the line kind of thing, he threatens to slap someone or warn someone to be careful not to get a slap. I think that's, the person's there doing their job. They're there to ask the questions that they've been told to ask, and he's there to answer whatever he's asked.
Right.
So I think that reaction off camera afterwards is, completely out of order.
To be completely honest, I think the fact that it's off camera is a bit, like, I feel like it would be easier to formulate a very, clear opinion if the incident was on camera where you'd be able to see it firsthand, because the quote in which, I read out just a minute ago, in which, he's all, you might get a slap even though you're a woman sort of thing, haha. Mm-hmm. Like, that sounds very haha to me. And I'm not trying to say that makes it okay, but if that is the context, it's not as big of a deal, in my view, as it's made out to be by a lot of other people.
I think the fact that he found it necessary to go to the Sunderland board straight away to let them know what had happened tells you that wasn't the context it was said in. Because if he said it as a joke, then I doubt he'd have seen what was wrong with it.
Supposedly, Moyes rang her afterwards, after he'd seen the video.
Even though the thing was off camera?
Yeah, I apparently that was, again, reported by The Guardian. That seems to be a thing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I heard that he phoned up to apologise and the BBC and her accepted the apology, but obviously it's the kind of attitude towards it all that's the problem, rather than... Obviously what he said is bad, but I think when he's in the kind of position he is, and, there's someone there doing their job, he's doing his, it just seems very kind of unprofessional and childish, and it puts not only him but Sunderland in a bad light as well.
I won't argue with that. I think rather than making this a sort of like a social justice kind of an issue, which I think a lot of people are making it, really and truly, I think it's just a bit silly. And it paints people in a bad light, but it's not this heinous, terrible act where, like, if everyday man were to do this in his everyday job, it really wouldn't, like, it would be passed off as nothing. And it's just one of those things where, because it's big media, everyone's seen you, you're a public figure, yeah, you're going to get criticism for it, and you need to accept that. So it's probably just better off you don't do it.
I think part of the problem, like the reason it's got as much kind of traction as a news story as it has, is if he was sat there with, hypothetically of course, if he was sat there with a male interviewer, I think it would probably be quite a lot less likely that he would say something like that. Obviously, I don't know for certain. But I think that's why it's kind of become as much of a story as it has, rather than just being he said something stupid and that's that kind of thing.
Whilst that's probably true, had that kind of comment been made to a male reporter, no one would have cared. Honestly, no one would have cared.
That's probably true.
So,
I mean, Nigel Pearson called people an ostrich, and that didn't really.
Yeah, that was just funny. So,
cause too many problems.
I mean, granted, he'd never threatened to slap an ostrich in the face, but you know,
that would have been quite the press conference. I don't know. I just think he was really silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like he's under enough pressure anyway. He's just kind of made it a little bit worse for himself.
Sure. Do you think he's going to get sacked at the end of the year?
It's difficult to tell. I think if they're looking at, they've kept him here this long, I've got to think that maybe they're planning for him to bring them back up from the Championship. But I don't know. Because he's not really... There's been times when it looks like Sunderland have made a slight improvement, and then they go and lose the next 4 games. So
sounds about right.
If they're going to change manager at the end of the season, that's really stupid. They should have done it when Hull did it, when Swansea did it. I still think he's a good manager. I mean, his reputation, what he did with Everton, for example, would suggest that at least. So I think Sunderland should stick with him, but whether or not they will is a completely different matter. What do you think?
I agree in the sense where if they were going to get rid of him, it should have happened a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this kind of a story might force the issue, especially if, like, Sunderland don't start to mount up a fight for escaping relegation. I mean, I think relegation's pretty much certain now, but they could still sort of like try and muster up a fight. And if they do that, then it's sort of less clear cut of him going. But I could definitely see him going down I could definitely see him getting sacked if Sunderland don't look threatening in any of their remaining games.
I mean, this is something I just kind of thought of when you said about the whole press with this and how it's looked to Sunderland might change things.
Right.
They're getting a bit of a... I don't know if it's bad luck with the people that they've employed over time, but they've not had a particularly good recent history with media stories. If you think about it, there was the stuff about Di Canio.
Yeah.
The Allardyce thing, kind of just after he left.
Yep.
Obviously Adam Johnson.
Let's not go there.
But like that, there's just some kind of curse about that club.
They should have just kept Poye, shouldn't they?
Yeah.
That would have been nice.
I'm sure we will have forgotten about some kind of story there as well.
Probably. Well, I mean, there was the whole him getting sacked without him even knowing about it.
Yep, that's something. But yeah, they've just
That just paints Sunderland in a bad light more than anything else, though.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think Moyes should be given more time, but obviously if they don't improve, then he's going to be in trouble.
Sure. Speaking of managers who probably won't leave, but probably should, Mourinho. Let's talk about Mourinho.
We've got a lot to talk about Mourinho.
We've got a lot to talk about with Mourinho, and this is going to be very, very fun. You and I have been waiting to do this for a while, haven't we?
We don't particularly like Mourinho.
No.
Why don't we like Mourinho? This will be fun. Okay. I mean that's not the important thing so much, but
It's not so much why we don't like him.
I mean we could talk for a lot longer about that, but this is going to be a kind of almost a kind of look at his time at United so far.
Sure.
Where we think they kind of stand.
Mhm.
Because they're unbeaten in 20 games now, which is impressive.
Is it,
Or
though?
is it?
Is it, though?
They have got the worst unbeaten record over 20 games
Am I right in saying it's
of
12
any
draws
team
now?
ever. No, it's 10 wins and 10 draws.
Oh.
Which is still pretty impressive. The worst points return from a 20-game unbeaten streak in history.
How long did Chelsea go unbeaten with Hiddink?
I do not know.
Because
That would have been a useful question to have been asked before we started recording.
Yeah, no, it just sort of came into my head then, though. Because obviously that was riddled with draws.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they drew as many as United have. I could be wrong there, but
No, I believe that, but
yeah,
10 wins, 10 draws from 20 games.
yeah, it's not as impressive as saying they're unbeaten in 20.
No, it's not.
Yeah, people earlier in the season were quite full of praise to an extent for kind of the progression since, or what they consider to be the progression since Van Gaal left. Do you think they've progressed at all?
I think they have a striker whom they can rely on to score, and their defence looks a little less shaky. But in terms of actual progression, especially when you consider and not that this should matter, but it does, considering that they spent ridiculous amounts of money on players like Pogba and such, no, they've not progressed at all. Because, I mean, look at their home record, for example. I believe Mourinho has a win percentage of 38% at Old Trafford, which is, and I do know this for sure, the worst home record win percentage for any Man United manager in the Premier League era. That I worded that so badly, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's actually 37.5%. So it's
I'm
that
rounding
tiny
up.
bit
I'm
worse
trying to be
than-
nice.
Let's not do that.
Okay, fine. Mourinho's rubbish.
Yes. But yeah, it's not particularly good.
No.
I think, and of the games they've drawn, I think they've drawn 8 at home this season. I might be wrong in that.
Mm-hmm.
But the most they've scored in any of them is 1.
Yeah, I mean, even if you took today's game, bearing in mind this was recorded on a Wednesday, 1-1, and the goal came from a last-minute penalty, no?
It did. United were on top for the majority of that game. But they struggled to break teams down, which is a criticism that was levelled at Van Gaal. Yet, for some reason, Mourinho, who sets up his teams a lot more negatively, I think, than Van Gaal did. Van Gaal might have played a kind of slow-paced, patient game, but I don't think you could have called him a particularly defensive manager.
I'm not sure how much I agree with that.
In the sense that they didn't set up so much with X amount of people behind the ball and play as a unit of defence and attack. Whereas, to give you an example, against West Brom at the weekend, Mourinho was criticising his front four.
Right.
For not being able to score against West Brom, who effectively played, all their players kind of on the edge of the box for most of the game.
Sure. Which is what small teams do against big teams for the most part.
Of course, but I think the problem that Mourinho hasn't picked up on there is they're playing a team who's going to do that, and he's praised their back seven and criticised the front four. Surely it would have made more sense to add in another attacking player against a team like that to try and break them down instead of being... I don't even know if pragmatic's the right word. Just being overly cautious for... I don't even know what the reason would be. West Brom aren't a team who are going to come and attack you in numbers. They're a team who might hit you on the break from time to time.
Sure. The thing is, though, and I don't want to speculate on how they should have played in the West Brom game, or indeed the Everton game, but going back to the point on whether Mourinho is or isn't more defensive than Van Gaal, I think it's just defense in a different way. Because Van Gaal wasn't particularly attacking. He was just, okay, we've got the ball. Let's keep a hold of the ball for as long as possible, regardless of where it takes the ball. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a kind of harsh criticism that's often sort of said towards Van Gaal. I think he was very structured, but I don't think he ever wanted to go away from that when times got a bit more desperate. Obviously, he did not play the long ball.
Oh, God. Accents are not going to become a thing.
I know. I was tempted, so I avoided it slightly. But he'd throw on Fellaini sometimes. But
yeah, as opposed to Mourinho, who does just start Fellaini.
Yeah. Yeah, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That he does the same exact thing except from the beginning.
Sure.
But I think, like I say, with Van Gaal, it was all about trying to kind of unbalance the opposition team.
Right.
I just don't think he had a backup plan for when that wasn't working, which I think is ultimately kind of what the downfall was. But I think that the intent was to unbalance them so they could attack rather than to keep the ball for the sake of keeping it.
I mean, that's all fine and dandy, but when you're not unbalancing the team and you're sticking with it, then you're keeping the ball for the sake of keeping the ball. And that is what it is.
I don't know how much I agree with that, but I think that's an opinion-based thing. I think if you've got a plan that you want to execute, whether or not you kind of persevere and keep trying to execute it, I don't know if that's doing it for the sake of it or just believing in what you're trying to do. I don't know.
I get what you're saying, but if it isn't working, then where's the pragmatism in that plan?
Well, no, of course, but I mean that's what my criticism I just said about Van Gaal was that they didn't really have an option to. Yeah. They tried to play the way that they had obviously trained to play and everything like that, but if it didn't work, they didn't have a backup solution.
Sure. But back to slating Mourinho and his lack of solutions. I mean, if it wasn't a last minute penalty that happened yesterday, as opposed to today, I mean, Everton would have won 1-0, and I mean, despite being on the back foot in that game, especially for much of the second half, you wouldn't have called it an undeserved win.
You're probably right with that. But I mean, Everton won going and hunting United, if that makes sense. They weren't at the most proactive.
No.
In terms of trying to kind of control the game and win the ball back quickly and the kind of things we probably associate with Everton now based on most of this season.
I guess, but when United's plan is get the ball to either Fellaini or Ibrahimovic, they'll knock it down, then how much pressing can you realistically do?
Yeah, I suppose it's not entirely unfair.
Just press those two. It's probably your best bet.
And press them in midair.
Yeah.
But I think it's... I mean, I don't... It's the kind of game that you would have thought United maybe would have had a bit of impetus for. But they just kind of didn't. And I think that's becoming a pattern at United, and it's one that, Mourinho's gone in and really hasn't changed at all. I think, when Moyes started at United, they were maybe losing more games. I think Van Gaal kind of went, at Old Trafford specifically, Van Gaal kind of went in and it became more draws, and now Mourinho's come in and it's more of the same, and I think he's actually drawn more.
Yeah, I'd believe that.
So I think, I'm not sure if this was a thing after the weekend or after the game against Everton, but I think he has to win his last 4 home games to avoid having the worst the lowest total of wins at home in a Premier League season for United ever.
Wow. Do you think he'll do it?
Oh, no.
Well, there you go then.
But I don't... I mean, Mourinho won the League Cup this season, but Van Gaal won the FA Cup last season.
Right.
And, Mourinho is still in the Europa League this season, and really, with the teams that are left in it, there should be no question that they should win it. Whether or not they will remains to be seen. But it might be a bit harsh, I don't know what you think, but I can't see any justification for him keeping his job if they don't finish... they're 6th at the moment. If they don't get above 6th or win the Europa League, I can't see any reason why he should stay when he's had a worse season or an equal season to what cost Van Gaal his job, having spent a lot more money as well.
Well, the thing is that Van Gaal was given 2 seasons before he lost his job.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that I think for a solitary second that Mourinho is going to do a better job than Van Gaal did in 2 years. But, that being said, with the names that are being linked with Man United, guys like Griezmann, for example, in terms of sheer player, star power, you can't imagine Man United will be too far off the sort of top 4. But the problem that sort of entails is that with players like De Gea, Pogba, possibly Griezmann, Ibrahimovic, why are they aiming top 4?
That's the thing. You say about them they'd be more confident of getting in the top 4, but you'd have said the same thing when they signed Di Maria. Oh, actually, no, they did finish top 4 then. But, Schweinsteiger, you would have thought would have helped them. He's gone now. Which we'll come on to in a moment about Mourinho kind of alienating and falling out with his players in a kind of high-profile way. But, the players that obviously Pogba, Ibrahimovic, Mkhitaryan, you would have thought those kind of players would be ones that would help you a long way towards getting Champions League football.
Yeah.
And as it stands this season, they'd be the surprise team to get it if they did.
Well, this is why I genuinely think, you've got teams, and I'll just throw the 2, Liverpool and Arsenal, who I think player for player probably aren't as strong as Man United. With that being said, and that's just an off the sort of top of my head thing, so I could be wrong, but
I think I'd probably agree with that.
Player for player, even if they are as strong, they're certainly not stronger. But yet, you could see that there are probably smaller amounts needed to be done for a team like Liverpool for them to step up to the next level, I would think. And probably a. I know Arsenal probably do need a bit of a shake up, especially if their star people go. But in terms of their actual ability, you don't expect that they would need too much more to step them up a little bit further. But with Man United, you're talking about... I mean, when players like Griezmann, and obviously this season now with Mkhitaryan, Pogba, Ibrahimovic, and they're still... they should have been top 4 certainties this season.
I think it should have been challenging for the title.
I mean, yes, but Chelsea have been ridiculous this season, so I think them not challenging for the title in actuality probably isn't that big of a deal.
I mean, it's kind of well and good saying that, but to put it into context, and I know this is a bit of a strange one considering how poor Chelsea were last season.
Sure.
And I quite like the fact that I said context, because context. Anyway, bad puns aside, that was possibly the worst one I've ever said.
My head is in my forehead.
Your head is in your forehead. Quality.
My hand is in my forehead. I hope I said that correctly, and I hope I haven't just said something really silly.
Oh dear. Anyway, he's taken Chelsea from 10th to now being top and looking pretty much certain for the title.
Yeah.
Mourinho went into United, who finished, I think I'm right in saying 5th.
Yeah.
And has taken them to 6th. Having spent
in fairness,
a lot more money.
He's been consistently 6th.
Okay. That's obviously a huge claim. He'll keep his job based on that.
Yes. But just to round off my point, if the players are good enough for a title challenge, and regardless of what you think about the playstyle, I don't think that really should matter too much, then surely the manager is the thing holding them back at this point.
I mean, you would expect so, but there's a lot of kind of times when you look at a squad and think, wow, that's a really, really good team, but it doesn't work out. So there's obviously... No, there's got to be something going on, because their players are good enough to be challenging, at least.
The thing is, we are talking about the best goalkeeper in the league, the most expensive player in the world, and one of the top goal scorers. That's 3 players, very, very key players, that have been virtually ever present this season.
Yeah.
And they're 6th.
I mean, that's not even included. They had the most expensive teenager in the world. I think same Bailey was what, 30 million.
Sure.
So him, I mean, sure, we'll get onto that in a minute. That it's a very, very kind of expensive team as well. So it's not like you would expect a lot better than what they're getting.
Well, I mean, I think I have an idea about what could be going wrong.
If it's the word Mourinho, that would be quite funny.
Well, that was my first idea.
Okay.
But my second idea is the fact that they can't seem to get their left backs on a strict diet plan.
Right.
Let's talk about this. Luke Shaw, and it's funny because we were talking about how not much has changed since Mourinho took over from Van Gaal. Luke Shaw's still unfit, apparently.
Yeah, I don't think that's what the criticism of him has been so much with Mourinho. However,
right.
I think he said that he's not been training hard enough and hasn't got the right kind of. I can't remember if he said something like he kind of called his mentality into question a bit. And even when he, for some reason, brought him on against Everton, and Shaw actually played quite well. He praised his body and completely blasted his mind, saying that kind of Mourinho did all his thinking for him.
He's in your head now.
Get out my head, you my better.
Well, so, alright, just to briefly bring this back to the Everton game. Ashley Young was the left back for the majority of that game. Am I right? Yeah.
And until he brought on Shaw.
Until he brought on Shaw. Now, Ashley Young was ineffective. I'm not going to say he was rubbish, but he was ineffective for the entirety of that match. Luke Shaw came on, whatever you like, and was delivering in cross after cross after cross. I'm not saying he was outstanding, but he offered a very different method of attack that looked more threatening for the short period of time that he was on.
I mean, to be fair, he's where the goal came from.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think the criticism that Mourinho's kind of aimed at him before the game, to then put him on the bench, and then bring him on, and then he... Would you say he was the best United player after he came on? I don't think it's excessively unfair.
It's probably not unfair. It's also not a difficult claim, because Man United weren't great.
Well, that is true, but to then claim that, you know, he did none of the thinking himself and it was all Mourinho. You know, he's got a history of kind of falling out with his players, and ultimately, at every club he's been at, that's apart from Inter and Porto, because obviously he just moved on from them.
Sure.
It's cost him his job at Chelsea twice and at Real Madrid as well. And I don't think it would be kind of incomprehensible to think that that could be the way things might go at United as well. I think since he's been there, he's criticised Rashford, Martial, Shaw, Lingard,
Darmian?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Schneiderlin, Depay. Obviously they've gone now. Schweinsteiger. So he's off to a good start.
And yet Fellaini still gets starts.
Yeah. And he won't have a bad word said against Pogba.
No.
So
no.
It's quite perplexing, I think is probably the best word.
It's nonsense, is what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, in that he'll defend some players in a certain way, and then he'll go out and completely annihilate and criticise others in the media and everything. I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that Shaw hasn't been as good under Mourinho as he was under Van Gaal, and obviously before that with Pochettino, and even before that.
Right.
Rashford hasn't been anywhere near as good this season as last season. Martial looks a ghost of himself.
Yep.
I mean, I'm trying to think who else there is, but it's easy to come to the conclusion that he just doesn't know what to do with young players. Do you think that's unfair, or would you agree with that kind of?
Well, I'm
sentiment?
trying to think in my head right now of who are the young players that he's improved, and I can think of a grand total of 0 people. I mean, you know, fire names at me if you think I'm being a bit biased for the sake of being biased here. But
I mean, I've got a very good reason not to do that, which will become apparent later in the show.
Oh, okay. Right.
But I can think of maybe 2 off the top of my head.
Go ahead.
Which I will mention later.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, he just, you know, at Chelsea, for example, he had a wealth of kind of young talent to choose from, and I mean, he didn't really aid the development of any of them.
That's probably fair to say.
At Real Madrid, he didn't really give too many frequent chances. I think
his Inter team was sort of, well, it was just old.
Yeah,
It never got younger.
No, I think maybe the one exception I can think of off the top of my head would maybe be Hesse. But that's not a particularly long list.
No.
So
the longer of the list of players he's alienated is certainly a longer list than the
without a doubt
developed.
I mean, you look at the list of players he's alienated. There's Chelsea.
Yeah.
There's Real Madrid. This list is quite long.
Right.
It's quite a substantial list.
Half of Manchester United.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, into just the younger players haven't improved, and United have spent a lot of money on some of them as well. And he's not. It's a big claim, but he's not the right man for the kind of recruitment that has gone on at United, and some of it's actually been quite positive over the last few years in terms of the youngsters they brought in.
Yeah. I think in terms of actually buying players, and I'm not saying he gets it right more often than he gets it wrong, but when he gets it right, he does typically get it very right. And, I mean, you can look at... I know this is like 10 plus years ago now, but, Drogba, for example, was a ridiculously smart buy.
Sure.
And Ibrahimovic, despite being there for only 6 months, has looked like a really smart buy.
See, it's
short term.
He's a player you bring up. He's even at the point where he's saying he might not be there next season now, just because he doesn't think they've gone forward. I think his kind of sentiment was that he hasn't come here to waste his time.
Well,
there's actually been a lot of reports about him agreeing a deal with LA Galaxy. Whether or not that's true is obviously it remains to be seen.
Sure.
But if Ibrahimovic goes, they're in a big spot of bother.
Well, I mean, you say that. He'll probably just sign somebody else for about 70 million.
Where do you think they'd be this season without Ibra?
With a better manager.
Ouch. I mean, they certainly wouldn't have won the cup.
No.
He scored most of their goals it's not most. It's just under half of their goals in the league.
Yeah.
So it's quite a heavy reliance on someone who might not even want to be there now.
That's fair. The thing is, if they didn't have Ibrahimovic, they'd have bought somebody else. I feel confident enough in saying that, because I can't imagine he would have relied on Rashford or Martial. And if he'd relied on Rooney, better manager.
Yeah, But we'll end this kind of talk about Mourinho. How long do you think he'll last?
He'll be there next season.
Do you think he'll finish next season? I know it's a bit early. You don't know who's going to bring him, but just on feeling now.
Nah, I don't want to say on feeling now, because there's just too many variables in between now and then.
That's fine.
Who do people buy in the summer? Who falls out with who? Who moves on to bigger and better things? There's no way of knowing.
I'd like to see him not there.
Sure, but I'd like to see him get sacked tomorrow. So
that'd be impressive if breaking news in the morning.
Yeah, you heard it here.
Just in case.
How many times do we say that?
We'll get it right one time, and we'll have our claim to fame.
Yeah,
and it'll be wonderful. But moving on from that guy.
Yeah, everyone's favourite manager.
Except for everyone.
Yeah.
Bit harsh?
Sorry?
Bit harsh?
No,
I didn't think so either.
No.
Results at the weekend were a little bit surprising.
Yeah.
Chelsea losing to Palace, do you think anybody would have predicted that? Being honest with themselves.
I'm sure there's one person in every betting shop who would have gone there being like, I've got a gut feeling about today. And that person probably loses a lot more money than they gain because of their gut feeling.
They might have got lucky this time.
No.
Same person who bet on Leicester last year.
Fine. Okay.
Anyway. Yeah, very surprising 2-1 win for Palace, which I believe is the second home defeat of the season for Chelsea, and the first one since they've switched to a 5-back or 3-back, whichever way you want to look at it.
I mean, the way Palace played, it certainly made it look more like 5-back.
I know you were very impressed with Zaha.
I was and am. It seems as though at Crystal Palace, at Crystal Palace this season, he's rekindled some of that magic that he had when he was back in the Championship. And he seems to be fulfilling a level of potential that we thought, and by we I think I mean the general public by this point, he'd probably lost.
Yeah, I think something, he's obviously been the main man there, especially since Allardyce has come in.
Sure.
But I think he works really, really hard as well.
He does.
So,
he does.
He's improving technically and physically all the time, it seems like at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of his work rate as well, I think of attacking players in the league, I might be wrong in this, but he's in the top 20 in the league for tackles.
Yeah.
Which is kind of mad, considering he's a winger.
He's a winger, but he's a winger who's... He's got the pace and the stamina to get back and forward pretty much at will. He's got the technical ability to do a lot of the things that he does. And right now it seems as though he's playing with the confidence that allows him to just boss the games.
Yeah.
So, especially now with Crystal Palace on a bit of a win streak now.
They lost today.
Well, you see, now I feel a bit silly. On what was a bit of a win streak.
They were doing fantastic.
They were. And yeah, it's just with a player like that who's obviously very confident in what he's able to do. And yeah, he ran over Chelsea.
Yeah.
And Palace just sort of followed suit. Although I did really, really enjoy Benteke's very, very cheeky finish.
Gotta love a chip.
Yep.
How big a club do you reckon Zaha could play for? Because obviously he was at United and it didn't work out at all.
No.
But how kind of high in the league do you reckon he could go?
Well,
it's quite difficult to say.
It is difficult because I think it also depends on sort of like who are we looking at that might not be there next season, who are we looking at that might not be where they are next season. I mean, look at someone like West Brom, for example. Obviously, I think it's fair to say overachieving this season.
It's an interesting kind of caliber of team you went to first there.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to start talking about your top six. And obviously by the top six, I mean Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham, Arsenal, and Everton. And City.
I mean, you say that.
Sorry. I wanted another dig at United. I'm done now.
That's fine. Mm-hmm. One of the teams who've actually kind of got concrete interest and actually tried to sign him in kind of the last summer window, and I believe they might have gone back in the January window, but I'm not certain about that, was Tottenham.
Right.
I think he'd be a good signing for Tottenham.
See, in terms of like their style, I would be inclined to agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not... like if we're talking about a first team signing, I don't think, as it stands, he makes the first team. I'm not saying he couldn't work his way into it, but I don't think he is a first team starter for Tottenham.
I think I'd agree with that.
And if I'm Zaha, and trust me, I'm not.
Breaking news.
I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm getting a lot of first team football. The manager obviously has a lot of faith in me now. Why would I want to jeopardize that by moving to a club where I'm definitely going to have to, like, there's no certainty of first team football.
Sure.
And obviously, you'd like players to have the mentality of, yes, but I can work my way into the team. And that's all fine and dandy. But if I mean, you look at when Zaha went to United and he wasn't given game time there.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I don't think it's unfair to say that probably killed his confidence a lot. And it's taken time for that confidence to rebuild.
Yeah.
If you're the kind of player that feeds off your own confidence, and if you're not getting game time, surely that'll hurt it, no?
I don't know. It depends on because he might have. I mean, you'd imagine he's probably grown quite a bit as a person since then.
Sure.
I mean, it kind of remains to be seen. I think he'll end up at a bigger club than Palace, and I think Tottenham will probably go back in for him.
It'd be interesting.
I think he's the one Everton should have got instead of Balassi, personally.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Although, again, it's one of those things where I don't necessarily know how much game time he'd get at Everton. Not to say that he wouldn't get any. I think Everton's probably more likely, but would you want to take the risk if you're Zaha? I mean, obviously, you'd like to think so, but I don't think necessarily doing it after 6 months of playing really good football that it would be the smartest move. I think staying at Palace probably is the best move for him, at least, so he could develop and showcase how good he actually is, rather than risk the move to a bigger club where he's not going to be always the focal point of the attack.
I'd probably agree with that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Anyway, he was very impressive against Chelsea at the weekend.
Yes. More of that.
Yes. Another. There was the Liverpool Everton match at the weekend was quite enjoyable as well.
Everton were aggressive.
They were.
Yeah.
I think Wijnaldum, being one player I can think of, wasn't particularly impressed and has criticised them a bit in the kind of the media since then.
Mm-hmm.
There was also Arsenal against City.
Yeah.
Where there was some really confusion. That makes no sense, but you understand what I mean. There was confusion.
I'm not sure I will. You've confused me.
So witty. There was confusion with Arsenal that it kind of boggles your mind how they even managed to get into that kind of muddle up. There wasn't a captain in the second half after Koscielny went off.
Yeah.
Which, that
well done.
It's impressive. Definitely.
It's such a silly mistake.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just silly. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. The other kind of big story from that match being I suppose the weird atmosphere just around the game. Arsenal celebrations were just almost cringeworthy to kind of see. There weren't really any.
Mm-hmm.
There was no joy to it at all. And I think the game as a whole was a bit kind of laboured from both teams towards the end of it.
I'm inclined to agree. City certainly weren't playing at full throttle for any of it.
Yeah.
I think Arsenal were probably the better team over the course of 90 minutes, but that's not saying much.
Yeah, I think looking at the other kind of big game this week being Chelsea City,
Yeah.
I think Guardiola's kind of realised they're not winning the title. Probably feels quite confident they're going to get top 4 at City. So I think he's just kind of gone to the point where he's testing out some of the rest of his squad.
Right.
So, Navas as a right back. We've seen Guardiola do some interesting things in the past. That's it's one of the weirder ones. Kind of the more left field ones, I suppose.
Well, no, he was on the right. Sorry.
Ay.
Mm.
Anyway, so there was that. Delph started his first game in the defeat to Chelsea.
Sure.
It's actually very good.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to you at the beginning, like, before we'd even seen any City under Pep, that I thought Delph would do quite well for City, and I've just been wrong. But
yeah, he's been quite good when he's been given a chance to be quite good.
Yeah, but
all 3 times.
All 3 times exactly.
Yeah, but
I don't know. I expected Delph to be a sort of a bigger player for them than he has been, albeit, I suppose, when you have a midfield 3 of Fernandinho, Silva, and De Bruyne, and that's not even bringing Gundogan into the sort of picture.
Yeah.
It's always going to be difficult for a player like Delph to get first team football.
I think if he plays like he played against Chelsea, and albeit they lost 2-1, if he plays like he did in that game, he'll probably get more minutes.
I'm sure Guardiola will find a way to turn him into a left back or something.
Yeah, I think that was the position we kind of thought he might end up at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
It's never too late.
It's not.
I mean, Chelsea didn't. The goals in that game were very kind of odd.
What do you mean by odd?
Well, Hazard's opener took like the slightest deflection and one of the worst bits of goalkeeping you'll ever see. There was loads of every shot seemed to get deflected and look funny.
Okay.
Courtois making the error that's obviously become associated for some reason with City, despite the fact they've only done it I think once this season.
Yeah.
Twice. I forgot about the Barcelona game, but that was calamitous. That gifted the goal to City, and then one of the worst penalty saves I think you'll see.
Yeah, like carrying the ball back towards the middle of the goal.
Obviously, it's a penalty, so it's okay. He saved it. That's cool, but yeah.
How does one save a? Don't get me wrong. Again, I'm not claiming to be a world-class goalkeeper or a world-class goalkeeping coach. But how does one parry the ball in the wrong direction from a penalty?
Tekkers. He's trying to play it out from the back.
Right.
And
you might have just heard me slap my leg then.
And on that terrible joke, it's time.
Go on, what are we calling it this week?
That quiz bit.
Oh, that quiz bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I've been asking the questions first more recently.
So why break tradition? No.
That's not what I was going to say.
That's not where you were going with that.
I think you should ask first.
Okay, cool. Well, my question is a simpler question than we've done in recent sort of weeks. And it's the kind of question in the sense where if you know it, you know it, and if you don't, you don't.
Okay.
Going back to the sort of David Moyes incident.
Mm-hmm.
There was a very easy link back to this. So, who was the female linesman that Andy Gray made sexist comments about
Was it Shan
that
Massey?
later got his release? Did you want to say that again?
Was it Shan Massey?
Well done. Right, yeah, that's the one. Well done.
Thanks.
You either knew it or you didn't,
And I did.
and you did, which means that I'm going to lose this week.
This makes me feel a little bit mean about my question. No, it doesn't. I lied. I will be victorious again.
Right.
Right. I have a list of players here
Mm-hmm.
who Mourinho handed a first-team competitive debut to, just to emphasise first team, so Castilla doesn't count if they made their first appearance for Castilla.
Right.
That doesn't count. Of the players that he's handed a first-team competitive debut to, can you name the ones who then went on to become a full international? To pass, I want you to get 5. There are 10. Obviously try to get all 10, but to pass, There's 5.
Right, we're going to have to establish 2 quick things before I start making attempts at this.
Mm-hmm.
1, if I get this 5, I've won.
Obviously.
Week. And 2, how many goes do I get at this? How many sort of before I lose?
Right, I'll tell you what. I want you to get 5. So if I give you, let's say, 10 fails, and I will tell you which clubs they were from, if that makes it easier for you.
Give me 3 fails. I don't feel like I need 10.
Yes, that's what I said. I said 3. You just misheard me. Yes, definitely 3. But what I'll do is
we'll be here forever.
I'll tell
It'll
you
be
how
longer than the Mourinho bashing segment.
I'll tell you how many there were from each club he has been at.
Okay.
So from Benfica there were none for you to guess. From Leria there were none for you to guess. From Porto there is 1.
Mm-hmm.
From his first spell at Chelsea there is also 1.
Mm-hmm.
From his time at Inter there are 3. From his time at Real Madrid there are 4. And from his second time at Chelsea there is 1. From this time at United there are none.
Right.
I think I said there were 4 from Real Madrid. I was wrong, there were 5, and the total's 11, not 10. My bad. Still need to get 5.
Their full first team professional debut.
First team competitive debut, yeah. So a friendly wouldn't count.
Right, that's fine. So players that have been brought in from other clubs and have played first team football competitively there obviously don't count.
Yeah, so for example, Mourinho, I can't remember if he did it himself, but released a list of players that he'd handed first team debuts to. On that list he had some players such as Casemiro, who had played a lot of games for Sao Paulo before he went to Real Madrid, so he would not be one of them.
Right. Kennedy.
Players who've gone on to become a full international.
Yeah. My brain just did a dumb then.
It did. Kennedy is not one of them.
Yeah, no, he hasn't played for Brazil. Why would he? He's basically in Neymar's position. It's not going to bloody happen.
No. He's not a full international.
No.
And even then, I don't actually think... Actually, Mourinho didn't give him his debut either, so... Unfortunately, that was wrong on both fronts.
Well, I'm bloody fantastic, aren't I?
Absolutely.
If anyone's listening to this, if anyone's listening,
I hope someone's listening to this.
Place your bets. Am I going to get this right? Ake?
Nope.
Oh. The odds have got better for you. All right, young Chelsea players. Did he get a competitive game?
It would help if I know who he was.
He must have done. Christensen.
Pause for dramatic effect.
Thank you. Okay, cool. That's one.
Yes, that is one.
You'd have had way too much fun if that were wrong. Then
Yeah.
You'd have been able to okay. Right. Okay. Oh, you said Hesse, didn't you, earlier on?
No.
Right. Okay, so that's Hesse.
Yep, that's 2 out of 5 with 1 life remaining.
Yeah. Oh, he's back in it.
Deep breaths.
I know he was there around that time. Did he? Did he make his competitive debut? He's definitely gone on to become a full international. Very, very good. Right, all or nothing, yeah?
You can do it, I believe in you.
Philippe Coutinho.
You couldn't do it, I was wrong to believe in you.
Ah, right.
Game over. Interesting. No, Coutinho did not make his debut for Mourinho. The answers from the players were at Porto, Ricardo Costa, who went on to play for Valencia and is currently at Luzern in Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
At Chelsea, the first time around, the only one was Ben Sahar.
Sick.
At Inter, one that I'm a bit surprised you didn't get, Davide Santon.
I see, I don't associate Santon with Inter. I probably should, but no.
Newcastle?
Yeah.
Okay. Another one was Rene Cohen.
Right.
And Alen Stevanovic.
Fine.
So they were the 3 at Inter.
Mm-hmm.
At Real Madrid, he had 5, which were Nacho Fernandez.
Probably should have got that.
Yep, this one I think you definitely should have got. Alvaro Morata.
Ooh. Now I feel really dumb.
Another one I think possibly should have got Denis Cheryshev.
Yeah. I can understand me not getting Cheryshev, but
yeah, fair enough. One of the ones who I believe has actually made his Spain debut very recently is Diego Llorente.
Right.
And then obviously Hesse.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Chelsea one you got, which was Christensen.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I lied, guys. I did know that, but obviously I've got to let Matthew think. That he's. What is my life?
I win.
Don't,
you can't see it because it's a podcast, but I'm smiling right now.
It's fine. I'm wallowing in self-loathing.
I hope you've enjoyed my marvellous victory. My crushing victory. I've been Matthew David.
I want to die. No. I'm Josh. I'm Josh Andrews, yeah.
That took a far less jolly turn than I was aiming to take it originally. But I hope you've enjoyed listening to Tinker Talk this week. If you liked it, then like it. Smooth. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, follow us on SoundCloud, and come listen to us every week because we'd really like that.
Well, I mean, I listen to the ones where I win.
There aren't many of them. Okay, bye!
Bye.